remove
Okay.
Okay, so let's
Okay, and then just take it. And one other thing is, a quick question, very brief, what I'm gonna do is swap we need the wires slightly on it, so I'll go to the audience.
Oh, you want to see if you can hear it?
Okay. Well, what if, when we go to the audience, what if I just go with that?
So he has the wireless for the audience, and the two questions that we need the wired mic for.
Yeah.
Christian is going to be on
He is.
mic and he'll walk around.
Okay, so
We can just stick with that. Okay, all right.
Okay, you're good. That's it. Do you mind if I have audio for this? Take the ask well for microphone.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing.
The audio is not working, but that'll be I guess.
You're not still not getting input?
It's just not,
Oh, like the main speakers? Well, I guess you don't, because it's the audio that works. Yeah.
You couldn't hear it.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm just saying, if the camera's right here, the speakers are right here. Oh, so there we are. Oh, no. Do you know the password?
is this the password?
No.
Oh, no.
What's the account?
It would be public, seriously public. Good, bad, lowercase CSC, F, R, uppercase
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Okay, very good.
Hello? Yes, sorry. I was afraid it would be a bad idea to serve beer before the event, so then nobody would come to the front here and participate. So yes, we are getting started. If you would want to take your seats, that would be great. Yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the second Fraunhofer CSE discussion roundtable about grid modernization in Massachusetts. We use the term grid modernization as a general term to describe significant changes, how we generate, transmit, and use energy. Changes which are necessary in order to transform our energy system to meet our 2030 and 2050 carbon reduction goals. This is, as I said at the first event, a massive undertaking requiring mobilization of the best resources our societies have in the areas of policy, regulation, business, and technology. And as a very practical example, what it takes to do this, we will talk today about building energy scorecards. Building energy scorecards have been around since a long time. The idea is decades old and has been implemented on voluntary and mandatory levels in various countries in the world. And recently, the Baker-Polito administration announced an initiative to make the use of such scorecards mandatory for residential real estate transactions as of 2020 in Massachusetts. So it's a quite interesting and bold proposal. Massachusetts would be the first state in the United States to actually implement it. So today's presentation and discussion is to help us understand how such a scorecard system works, what the experience with mandatory systems has been in Germany and in Europe, and to discuss if we are ready in Massachusetts to actually implement it. And among our guests, I'd like to welcome Steve Pike. He hasn't arrived yet. I wanted to acknowledge Steve Pike as the CEO of the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, a steadfast supporter of the whole Massachusetts clean energy ecosystem and also of Fraunhofer CSE. For this event, I'm happy that we could win a very knowledgeable speaker and 3 additional expert panelists together with a thoughtful moderator to have a great discussion. And I start out with introducing our speaker, Hans Erhorn. Hans is the head of the Department of Energy Efficiency and Indoor Climate at the Fraunhofer Institute for Building Physics in Stuttgart and Holzkirchen. It's a research institute with about 400 researchers focusing on the physics of buildings, how to make them better and more energy efficient. Hans worked on the addition of the energy performance certificates in 2007 to the existing German energy saving ordinance implemented in 2002, and currently works with the European Union to develop the next generation of energy passes or scorecards for residential and commercial buildings. He holds a degree in environmental engineering from the Berlin University of Technology, and he is a specialist in developing energy concepts for buildings, energy efficient building components, and neighborhoods. And he has been a project coordinator of about 250 national and international projects, research, development, and demonstration projects within the last 35 years. So he has been around the block, and Hans, we are looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. Always when you hear such introduction, then you remember how old you get. So 35 years is a long time, and was a real good experience. And I'm happy that I can talk a little bit about this experience today here in Boston and share the information with you. Okay, yeah. So we have had an introduction. Fraunhofer is well known, and our institute is one of the oldest institutes in the Fraunhofer Society. We are getting to have our 80th celebration in the next time, and I am concentrating, or I am leading the division of energy and the environment. What is very helpful for us as researcher in the Fraunhofer Society is that we have a long-term commitment of at our government. So the government committed to know what they can deliver to the market to reduce the energy demand. We have had 26 solar houses. You see here, the final result was that we have a good solar input in these houses, but the technology was not so far developed that the final energy demand of the houses was still very high. And 35 years later, currently we started another initiative about positive energy houses. Still solar houses, the technology has been developed, and now we have houses with the same approach, but we earn more energy with the house environment than the house needs to need for driving the heating and domestic water system. When you tell about this new houses, all the people say that's easy. Yeah, it's clear technology. You have to put it together, but that was a long way, and this long way takes 35 years. And there was a way to always go to the industry, ask the industry to bring it forward, to make it more efficient, all this development. That are the steps, what we have taken in the requirement in Germany, but all the European country has comparative graph. You see here in the part here, that are our main research project. Every 5 to 10 years, we start a new initiative. Now we are on positive energy buildings, and we have tightened every 5 to 8 years, we have tightened our requirement. You can see in the first 20 years, we have nearly half the energy we need for the building at the beginning, and then we have halved in nearly 20 years. And the next 20 years, we do the same procedure. When you compare that with the economy, before you see here the building stock, that is a new building requirement, and the building stock you see is on a much higher level, but they have the same tendency. That's a good thing, and I will tell you why we have this tendency. When you compare that with the economic boundary condition, you can see here the energy price of oil in this same period. And you see in the first 20 years, we have had very low energy prices, but we still tighten the requirements. And therefore, it's very important that you not always wait for high energy costs. It's so much reason that you do tightening. And you see the energy economy is very different. What we have done, the way to this way, is that we concentrated on the main parts always. So we started with the weakest part in the energy balance, that was the environment of the buildings. And then we set up requirements to the environment, and we tightened them up, and later then we included ventilation. Oops. No, that was too fast. We included ventilation And then we included the losses of the heating and air conditioning system. And finally, we integrated as well the quality of the energy source, what you use in the building. I am sure that we will go further on and maybe also integrate the energy what is embedded in the construction in the later stage when we have to think about. But the most important thing, what I learned is that you do good things, but you report about the things and you show the impact of the things. And one of these things was that we integrated energy passes in the very early time. You see, end of the 80s, we had the first application of an energy procedure. And this all was voluntary, and we had the European Commission set up a framework on the energy performance of building and asked the member states to fulfill this framework with the requirements and with procedures behind it. And what the German government then started was to develop a tool to publish this efficiency of the building, and then first use the public building to display on the public building. And there was a lot of different public buildings that we showed the screen and showed to the public how is it efficient and what can be done to be more efficient with this kind of building. So we also did it on international level. And then we used the framework of the European Commission or European Parliament. The framework of the European Parliament means that they looked of different elements, but we have to concentrate on to look for lower energy demand in the European Commission, and as well for climate protection in the European Commission. You see renewable and all the elements what is important. And our part, we are looking on this, here the part of the energy efficient of building, and currently we are discussing in Europe how we can bring it more efficient. One part of this energy performance building directive is the display, the energy performance certificate we call it. And this energy performance certificate is a paper, but the paper itself is not the real challenge. The challenge is to have a process behind that ensures that it is a fair procedure on one side, that it is a transparent procedure on the other side, and this procedure works to affordable prices. So if you manage that all, then you find out that you need software assistance. So you need some, first you need a procedure, then you need a procedure that can be handled very easily. So you need databases, you need qualified expert, you need a control system, independent control system, and maybe you need some help that you reduce the cost by using other services you have to do in the building itself. So that is the procedure, what is behind this energy performance certificates, what we have to implement in the European countries. Important points, what we find out over the years, that is now in process since more than 12 years, is communication. So you have to communicate to the people why it is important to have the certificate. Implementation of the independent control system, and also then the system that if you don't fulfill the requirements, what can you do to sanction you? And although then you have to have some resources to manage that, and you have to resources to train the expert, and all the things finally that have to be done. In Germany, we started with field tests. So what we try to do is to apply on a certain level of building this procedure, and then look, does it work, or do we have to adjust the system, and after then we do it for the whole building stock. And our idea was that we have no difference in the procedure between new buildings and existing buildings, that we have comparable results. And our first idea was just to set up an assessment procedure, but we find out very fast that a couple of people are not happy about to only calculate the energy performance. If you have an existing building, you meter the energy demand. Why you should not use the meter data to make the assessment of this. And therefore, then we developed a benchmark system how you can compare metered results to anything. It is a good result or a bad result that we have. Then we fixed this situation. We allowed to have both direction, energy demand, asset rating, and energy demand and operational rating. And what we have done, we fixed a little bit the procedure that you have really comparable results. So that means in the asset rating, so we make a calculation on standard climate over Germany, and we make a calculation of standard behavior on the user of the building. And then the recommendation, what we have in the screen, was then improvement that we calculated. And the other direction was a little bit difficult because it's easy to get the consumption and make the benchmark system, but then how you come to the recommendation. And therefore, we have discussed a lot how you, when you only have measured data, how can you recommend you should insulate the wall, or you should use better windows, or you should concentrate on the heating system. But at the end, we have some kind of checklist what the assessor has to fulfill and check the different things, and then he can give this recommendation. That are the both certificates that we are using. On the left side, the calculated version. On the right side, the measured version. And you see that is on the first view, you have the same image what you are seeing. But there are some differences in the reporting scheme what is behind there. Important also was the calculation procedure and all the procedure. So we standardized that. We have a standardization committee. We're very good and open standardization committee with all trades in the back. And you can see here all the different things what you can calculate and what you can get handled here to get an energy certificate. Every 3 years, we renew the standard. So if you have new innovation, you can very fast bring this innovation into this procedure. And we find out as we published the standard the first time and was used the first time, it has also needed some support, some simplification support. When you perhaps go to an existing building, you cannot every information you cannot meter. Therefore, we developed some procedures how you can get information for standard values of thermal capacity or something else, what is from the building age of the 50s or from the building age of the 60s. So that was important that we have additional information for the assessors that they can really assess very, very fast the result to the of the buildings. As we set all this tools have developed and given to the market, then we started a field test, and I will give you the outcome of this field test because this was really really important, this field test to do before we implemented it on the brighter score. DENA, that means the German Energy Agency, they started this field test and they give us a contract to make all this evaluation. And so what we have done is we started with the main stakeholders, this process. So we just not go and certify all the building. We first make a panel, invited all the stakeholders, they are relevant, and then we choose representative buildings, what we have implemented in this field test at the end. The outcomes, the main outcome was we have 4,100 building integrated in this test, was that the main request of the building owner was from the small houses. So the small houses users, they was mainly interested, and yeah, they feel that it's very helpful to have more detailed information about their houses. It was a good market acceptance and understandability of the certificates because we reviewed it. The cost at the end was lower than expected. The evaluation shows that you have a really big impact on the modernization strategy if you publish the strategy in your scheme. And although the industry was interested to have such kind of instrument. Just some results at the end. That is here different groups. On the left is the private owner, the landlords, and the housing companies behind. And we asked them about recommendability. That's a strong English word. Interesting was the owner, the private owner, they are much more positive to the certificates than the housing organization. But that the real reason was that the housing organization mostly had a department, and they said, we know everything about our house, we don't need a certificate. But the private owner and the household, they welcome very much that they have such kind of certificate to give them information. Then there was another question about the impact of this certificate to further activities in modernization. And so what we have here also is the three groups. And the first question was, gives it an impulse? The certificate gives an impulse for modernization. So you always see the both groups of the private owners. They have a great impulse. The housing organization said we have already known what to do. And then also the better planning of what has to be done in the future with the building was by the private group. And also the question, is there any impact of the certificates? So the highest number, 50% of the housing organizations said no impact because we know it already before. The question about the market value of this certificate. We asked also, and also here, interesting, the private people believe that the impact to the market value is much higher than the housing companies believe in that. And the discussion, what we have had is that the private people believe that when you have a house with a good energy certificate, then you have a house with a good performance, and you have a house that is always on a good stage. And therefore, an energy certificate is an indirect indicator that the house has a high quality. And yeah, the housing company is always a little bit negative and said that this. We did the same 10 years later in a European project. And you see here the people, we asked in Germany 90 people in different member states, different kind of people. And you see here Germany has a very high rate in believing in the value, the better value for the building, better value for energy certificates, good energy certificates to the value of the building. So that is very good that we have in Germany at least, but also in the other member states, there is a belief in the certificates very high. At the end, we also discussed about the scaling. How should it be done? And we offered two approaches. One is a classical A to classes, and then you show where you're building and which class your building is. And the second one was an open scale, a band strip presentation. And at the end, that was also for us interesting, was the most people was interested in the open scale discussion, not in the classes. And what was the reason in the discussion? The reason was the classes always has, you spring every 10 kilowatt hours, and all houses in the same classes may have 30 kilowatt hours, but also 20 kilowatt hours when you have class A, perhaps. So, and the people, they have the houses are interested to show that my house has 22, and maybe better than 23 from my neighbor. So therefore, there was really an interesting interest to show the real value and not classify it into classes. The lessons what we have learned was, first of all, it's important to make, when you make such kind of process, make it transparent. Then to involve all the stakeholders directly at the beginning. And also important that you have regional multipliers, because when the process is running, the assessor should not travel a lot. So you should do that on your regional part. And also important is that you have prepared the experience and information campaigns and make it public so that everyone knows exactly what happened and supports this. At the beginning, as I told, we have had some problem with the measured, with the comparison between measured and calculated value, but finally we solved this problem. And discussion about limitation of simplification, it's always in the field, but there is always also the discussion about the price. So if you will have a low cost certificate, then you mostly have to make a simplified process at the end. Okay, so summing up to what we have done and what I have learned in this long process is important is we need something to do. So we have to reduce the energy demand in our country, I think. And therefore, the policy has to provide the process and make the process transparent. And our experience is that the scorecard is really a good element to make transparency to the situation, to the energetic situation of your house. And the best is not only to make it transparent, but also to give recommendations, to add recommendations. That is in Germany the case. You cannot only give the certificate, you also have to give the recommendation list. And essential is that all the involved stakeholders work together, and you continue and you refresh your procedure when you find out that you have something that doesn't work anymore. So we have an every 3-year procedure in Germany that we discuss these things and find out what have we to change and what have we to make better. At the end, we have a very successful tool, and I hope very much that you here can also have such kind of success, and in the next 10 or 20 years you can tell your story. Thank you very much.
Hans, please say yes. Thank you very much, Hans, for the very interesting presentation.
Question or not, but as I'm sure you know, the US works in different ways, right? It's very difficult to have the policies lead. And regulatory side going ahead, and then compliance becomes the issue, the way you find in Germany. It just doesn't work that way. So how do you what can we use from the journal? What can we learn? Because I mean, the process necessarily has to be different here, right?
Process has to be different. Leave? Okay. Of course, I think there is difference in, we believe very much in our policy. And when the policies, the European or the German policy said we have to go this way, we will follow up. And that's helped very much. We have clear rules to do that. But I believe at the end, the society has to go the way to reduce energy demand and for climate protection. So if the policy is not taking care and goes away, then anyone else, I don't know who in the society will be the driving force, but at the end, we have to go, and you also have to go this way to reduce the energy demand. And when you have had the last time the presentation, as I heard here from Hans-Martin Henning, you also change your energy system. You cannot change your energy system from fossil fuel to renewable fuels without reducing energy demand. If you have the same energy demand and you try to reduce it, it's impossible. That is the experience that we have. So therefore, maybe that's the energy, how is the word in English? The energy Lieferanten, the energy suppliers. Maybe the energy suppliers are the good facilities that they push this process forward. I don't know. Yeah, but may I learn also from the discussion in the panel.
Okay, thank you. One more question before we switch over.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is about, you mentioned about 30% of private homeowners found the certificate compelling for modernization. And I was wondering, what additional information do you think would need to be added to increase the response to your desire to modernize?
That was just no, it's not possible anymore. This was the situation as we started with the EPCs, the introduction of the EPCs, and the experience in this time was small, and therefore you get a right, most people are skeptical, as normal people are, when you introduce a new system. Therefore, it's normal that you have just small number of believers in the process. I think when you do the same question today, you will have a much higher score of people. They feel that the energy certificate is a real good instrument to introduce. And what we currently discuss and prepare is that we not only make a certificate in the current station, in the current status, but also a long-term process where we advise the client of the building for the next 30 years. What can he do by step-by-step renovation to make the process on the right way and payable for the owner of the building. So that is also a change that we have not just to implement the situation as it is, but also to give an advice in the long-term procedure.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you for the questions. One more round of applause, please. And with that, I'd like to introduce the panelists. We will have Alison Precious here on the panel, the Director of Climate and Environmental Planning at the City of Boston. Ian Finlayson, he is the Deputy Director of the Energy Efficiency Division of the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources and deeply involved in the current initiative for mandatory energy scorecards. And then we had a number of short notice changes. Unfortunately, despite the beautiful weather, some people unfortunately got sick. And Joan Glickman from the Department of Energy unfortunately canceled yesterday evening, and she said she could not fly up here. Hans will instead join here the panel discussion. And then Carolyn Goldthwaite from NEEP, the New England, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, also this morning only cancelled. Unfortunately, Samantha Caputo agreed to very short notice jump in and represent NEEP, an organization which has a long history in dealing with energy efficiency and buildings here in New England. And then we have a pleasure that Bruce Moll, the editor of the Commonwealth magazine, will lead the panel discussion again, as he did last time. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.
All right, we already had some good questions, so in the panel discussion, we'll try and follow up on some of those if we can. So to my right is Ian Finlayson.
That's right.
I'm sorry about that little botch. Of the Department of Energy Resources. So you're going to be the guy on the hot seat a little bit here. The Baker administration has proposed these energy scorecards. Give everybody a little sense, just in a brief overview of how it would work and what the intention behind it is.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm guessing that some of this audience is fairly informed on this idea already, but I thought the presentation earlier kind of gave you a good overview of the process. Essentially, what the Baker administration is looking to do is start to build the infrastructure for delivering residential scorecards, and then a few years after that process is up and running, working with folks like the MLS, roll out those scorecards at times. Same way as they know about the walkability of the neighborhood or the quality of schools or all of the multitude of other factors that influence home sales.
So that's a very, very good example. I remember when the governor introduced it, someone that was joining him on the stage said, we rate light bulbs, we rate all these things that we use energy with, but we don't rate our homes. So this was a move in that direction. We heard here about how Germany has spent 1989 they started this process, so we sound like we're way behind the curve here to a certain degree. How quickly, if the legislature were to say yes to this, these standards that seem to take a long time to develop in Germany, can we learn from that so it could go fairly quickly, do you think?
So a couple of things on that. So my first project working on this idea was under the Romney administration. So in 2007, I was sponsored to go over to Europe and learn about energy scorecards. That was an event in the UK. I've subsequently been over to Europe 3 different times. So we've been tracking what's been going on rather than just come up with this idea recently. And there's been legislation, I think, in at least the last couple of legislative cycles in Massachusetts. So we've been using that time, a little over 10 years now, to think about the whole process of implementation and some of the work that NEEP is doing on how do you collect scorecards and serve them out in a convenient way to the MLS. That's an initiative that's been going for several years now. There are different components here. So that helps. The other key point I would make is that the legislation, and I think sometimes this gets misreported, rather than saying you have to deliver scorecards by 2020, it says no sooner than 2020. So I think one of the tasks for our energy office would be to say, when is the market ready? When is all of the infrastructure operating smoothly? And when do we want to make this requirement happen? One last thing, we did do a pilot demonstration, a little bit like Hans talked about doing a field demonstration. I think you said 4,100 homes. We did 3,850 homes
In Springfield, right?
in the Springfield area, and that was done 2013, 2014. So we've had time to learn from that. And we have another pilot program going right now that we just kicked off in November. And there are other initiatives. There's another initiative in the state also doing scorecards. So I think there's more going on than perhaps a lot of folks are aware of.
Samantha Caputo of the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership. What do you think of this approach? And Ian was sort of saying that you're already involved in some early beginnings of it. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So NEEP has been, since the beginning of 2016, we have been working on a DOE state energy program grant for the state of Vermont, and we are trying to help close the gap or fill the gulf between the real estate community and real estate market with home energy information, home energy labels that states have been implementing either voluntary or mandatory programs. And so right now there's no system in place that will enable those labels or certificates to find their way into the multiple listing service to be available on the real estate market. So Helix, which is the Home Energy Labeling Information Exchange, will be that database that will allow home energy score, HERS rating, DOE zero energy ready homes, any state-grown programs such as the one that Massachusetts is currently working on, to go into the MLS on a voluntary basis. And it's really meant to be a tool to help transform the real estate market. And so we know that the residential market in New England accounts for over 20% of carbon emissions. So by providing transparency in the market as to the energy consumption, what the efficiency opportunities are, we can help start to drive home energy retrofits through that. And so it's really working on that market transformation tool that we've been doing now. But we've also been tracking activity throughout the region. And so Connecticut, for instance, has been a champion in DOE home energy score. They have over 30,000 home energy scores completed to date, but no way to put those in the real estate market currently. And so Helix will provide that vehicle. It'll also help, it will take away any additional work that real estate professionals have to do when listing a home. So the database will automatically populate the MLS. It won't require more work for real estate professionals. It will just, in a way, it takes a step away for them right now, where they have to manually fill in these little green fields that are on the MLS.
So there was a question from the audience about sort of the motivation that makes people respond to this. And I've had an energy audit of my home, and they listed countless things that I needed to do, and I immediately went, oh my God, that sounds really expensive. And I did a few of them, probably the easier ones, and then sort of lost track after a while. Is the idea here that if it's part of the real estate transaction, as a buyer, this will come into my decision-making, and as a seller, then I have to respond to that mindset, and so that will, it's sort of a market incentive to make people make these changes to their homes?
It can help incentivize. So there are programs out there currently that aren't a part of a time of sale program. And so, for instance, if you get a DOE home energy score, Connecticut does it with their home energy audits, and with that audit, you get a score. And so it will show you on the market how your home prepares or the level of efficiency. So if you were to go through certain home energy retrofits, you would have an understanding of how that might improve the quality of your home as far as comfort goes, as far as health goes, a lot of those other impacts that are associated.
But the incentive is, I want to increase the value of my home, so I would make these changes and the comfort of my home?
That can be part of it, yeah. It can be, I want to increase the value of my home, or I want to reduce the cost of my energy bill over the years. So a lot of these scores will show you, this is the cost of energy at the current level of efficiency of your home. This is the level of savings that you may be able to achieve over a current base code or HERS rating if it's based on new construction. And so it can show you, yes, it can increase the value of your home if you go through some of these changes, but it can also just be an incentive to try and save yourself some money on your home energy bills, which are some of the highest bills that homeowners experience on an annual basis.
Allison, to my left, is the Director of Climate and Environmental Planning for the City of Boston. We were talking before this, and she said she used to live in Chicago not too long ago. And Chicago has implemented one of these programs and they're moving to, you said, a letter grade. So I could have an F on the outside of my house, not an I. You went all the way to I, but you could have a bad score. And is that, again, sort of the motivation behind that? Like, if you're a restaurant, you don't want that on your window. So as a homeowner, you don't want it either. It's sort of further.
Yeah, so as I understand it, Chicago has had some form of energy reporting at time of sale for a number of years, I think going back to 87 or 90, but it was more of a paper transaction, and that they've recently updated their law in the 2013s, 2014s to allow for this type of MLS linking, and that those who voluntarily have done that linking, they have seen increases in the selling prices and decreases in the time to sale for the properties that participate in that voluntary program. I think, as you said, there's that value capture, right? So if your home is already performing well, you want to capture that value that's already in the market and increase the market transparency, as you said. You also want to incentivize and reward cleaner, more efficient homes and raise awareness of it so that people can take advantage of a lot of the subsidies and energy retrofit programs that already exist in the state.
So
the letter grade, I think they're doing, I have to check they're starting with commercial properties. I'm not sure exactly whether that moves into residential or not.
So when the governor announced this, the real estate industry was in the room instantaneously complaining about how onerous this would be. But let's say the governor hasn't said a whole lot about this. I think it's going to be a bit of a time before he gets his pass. What about the city of Boston? Are you interested in the city? And it sounds like cities are sort of leading the way here in some way. What's the level of interest from the city?
So it's absolutely one thing that we're exploring, and we're very interested in working with the Baker administration. We're talking with them a lot about how this might work between the state and the city. It's one of a host of things that we're really evaluating right now in terms of how to increase energy efficiency and promote energy savings throughout the city. Right now, we're in the middle of a project called Carbon Free Boston, which is really meant to take this and a number of other policies and evaluate what are their real greenhouse gas impacts potential, their potential costs, and their added benefits in terms of cost, in terms of increased health and air quality and other benefits, to really understand what all of our options are, and then we can make a strategic choice we know we have to do many, many options to get to our goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. What's the ordering? What's the right prioritization? And we want to have that discussion with the community, but have the data we need to have that be a very science-driven, data-based conversation.
I had two questions on your presentation. One was there was a reference at one point, I may have misinterpreted this, but to penalties. It sounded like if you had a bad score, there might be some penalty. But at other times you just talked about transparency. Were there penalties or are there penalties?
The penalties are not for the score, but the penalties are for a bad process. So if an assessor go to the house and make his assessment, and he made not the process as he should do, and he made a better value than the house will have, therefore it's a penalty. So it's to regulate the process but not penalty for low scores.
And when you said you were setting this up, you mentioned you needed software, you needed people to do the inspections. How big of a bureaucracy or how big of a costly effort is it to do these audits and come up with the scores?
I don't know in money, but the process perhaps for the procedure itself, it was a standardization process. So that took 2 years, bring all the stakeholders together, that they agreed the process. The database that was processed, I don't know exactly yet, €500,000 or something else. But this was very important, also for the industry at the end that we now have a database and we are more transparent about the situation of the building sector, on the building sector. And now we can start programs, supporting programs, financial supporting programs, to concentrate when we know in this city you have a problem of bad window, so then you can start a window investment program. And therefore is the database at least so valuable as to show the main outcome of the certificates.
Would the same people that do energy audits as you envision it, do these energy scorecards?
So, I mean, I think that's the obvious place to start. As Samantha mentioned, in Connecticut, they've already rolled that out. In Vermont, I believe they've already rolled that out. And actually, in Massachusetts, if you live in some of the municipal electric served towns, I believe there's 20 towns where they've rolled out a scorecard as part of the audit. So Massachusetts isn't inventing anything there. We're catching up to our neighbors on that side of things. Given that we have one of the strongest energy efficiency programs in the country, and we're doing in the order of about 80,000 audits a year, we see that as a real way to get the process up and running. And then, as Samantha mentioned, you want to have a way to warehouse those scores, because you might have got your energy audit planning to stay in your house for another 10 years. We want that scorecard to still be available to you in 10 years' time when you're selling, so that it's not something that's going to interfere with your real estate transaction. It's just there, goes straight into your MLS system. So that's step one, and that can be partially voluntary. But we think that if we have legislation in place that says this is going to become a market transaction thing for the real estate market in the future, it will really kickstart that. So the utilities in Massachusetts, I think, have all the capability. The software is in place, the database is getting finalized, the pieces are there, but the market driver or the policy, as Hans was describing it, hasn't been instituted yet.
Samantha, it sounds like sort of a no-brainer in a lot of ways. Is the real estate industry, just off base with their opposition to this?
I wouldn't say that they're off base. They definitely have viable concerns, and I think it's just a matter of education and connecting the two industries. So you have the energy industry that is all for, or the energy efficiency industry, we're all for pushing home energy retrofits and bringing that value to the marketplace. And then real estate professionals, it's a matter of providing an understanding and training to them to understand the value of energy efficiency in the home and how transparency can increase values in homes, how it can increase the time of sale or time that a home, how fast it sells on the market and things like that. So I think bringing up viable concerns and then providing resources for them to have an understanding of what it is that the market is trying to do, how to respond to that, how to value energy efficiency, solar energy, all these different attributes that a home may have within the market, and really use that and transform with the market and with home buyers and sellers that are starting to really value this, want it within their homes. You're seeing it even within other markets, such as buying cars. I know ACEEE came out with a report recently saying fuel economy is one of the most essential pieces in the marketplace when considering a new car. So kind of trying to get the real estate market to go in that way, where home buyers and people selling their homes want the energy consumption and efficiency of their home to be one of the most valuable pieces. And I know some of the concerns that come up are a lot of times with the low income sector. Is it going to be kind of disproportionate or impact them negatively by having a scorecard on those homes? But with the low income sector, you're seeing a strong or very high energy burden within that sector, especially within New England states, where a lot of those homes are still heated on oil. And so the cost of their energy bills throughout the winter become unburdened by providing the energy cost and consumption data. When those folks are going out into the market to buy their home, it just gives them an idea of what type of situation they're going to be getting into when buying a home. Comparing a home at one price and another home in the same type of market range, but one has lower energy costs, that might be a deciding factor for someone within the low income sector. But it also doesn't necessarily have to make or break it if the school district or if the neighborhood. There are other deciding factors which drive it, and then just understanding energy consumption just provides transparency to kind of lock it down faster.
Ian, sort of a nuts and bolts question. If so, when they come in, it's been a while since I've done this, but when they come in and do an energy audit, they sort of say, do you have insulation in the walls? Do you have insulation in the roof? And they recommend various things that you can do. So when they turn that into a score, they don't need to look at your utility bill, or they can just look through the house and make that determination, or do they actually need to get some additional data?
Yeah, so I'm glad you raised that, and Hans addressed this a little bit. So what they've done in Germany is they have an asset rating for smaller homes, so sort of 1 to 4 homes, and then they use utility bills in large buildings, so multifamily buildings. So what we're thinking of starting with is that asset rating, in part because the 1 to 4 family homes, as Hans also said, are where people are more interested in the scorecard information. It's going to have more market value right away. The first pilot that we did, we worked with existing software that was already being used for energy audits. And we said, do you collect enough information to generate a scorecard? They had to modify, I think, 2 of the data points they were collecting. Not add them, but just modify them. And they were able to generate the scorecard. So we've been working with software providers that do energy audit software. And now I think there are 7 or 8 around the country that have this capability built in. That said, there is some value to also collecting utility data. And some utilities, and a couple of the big ones in Massachusetts, you can get your utility data online through a standardized process that the Department of Energy develops. So we're also interested in, can we import utility data in to inform the assessment? So you can do an asset rating just using data collected from the visit, or for new construction with a HERS rating, you're getting more data input, got a better sense of the new home. But with existing homes where you've got usage information, you can bring that in as well and use that to calibrate your score if you want. So I think that's one of the big questions that in a stakeholder period, after any legislation passed, we would engage in that discussion and try and come up with the optimal solution. The pilot that we're running now and that municipalities that are muni towns are running actually does use both asset information and operational information.
Excuse me, for asset information, does that mean if you have a one family home, it has a standard rating, or what do you mean by that?
Sorry, so the term asset versus operational, asset really means characteristics of the home that an assessor can go in and look at. So what type of wall construction do you have? What kind of insulation level is in that wall? What are your windows like? What is your attic or basement configuration? So they're kind of physical facts about your house that somebody with a software tool can plug in, and that can do modeling based on typical, the modeling software will have run against 20,000 other homes with wood construction with this kind of wall, and it will use that to decide how much heat loss there's going to be in your house. As opposed to looking at your gas bill or your electric bill, that's going to give you some sense of the house performance, but also it's going to be skewed by, do you have 6 children in your house, or are you an empty nester who spends half the winter on Cape Cod? Those kind of behavioral issues are going to skew it. So we're trying to find the best of both worlds, and we're probably going to start with an asset type score initially, which is what Europe has selected to do as well.
Allison, would you think I guess I'm sort of thinking that the scorecard deals with how much energy you consume in the house, but would solar panels on the roof, would oil heat, would they be, solar would be good, oil heat would be bad, would they score against you, I guess is what or is it just how much heat loss you're losing, or what? What do you think?
Well, I think Ian would certainly know, but I would believe that we would want to make sure that as such a system, even if it's not in the first cut, but in the later cuts, did capture that added value of, say, a solar panel, which lowers your electricity bills and provides cleaner energy, or the opportunity to switch away from an oil boiler to an air source heat pump or something like that. I think some of that will be captured, so the oil boiler would be captured in the asset score, I would expect.
It would?
Yeah, and solar
And
as
solar
well.
as well.
So there would be an incentive to shift in fuels as well.
Yes. So, I mean, again, the advantage of 12 years of following Germany and other places, but also efforts in Chicago or Portland or Austin, Texas, is that a lot of these questions have come up and good answers have been found. So in Germany, I think Hans was saying, between the letter grade and the open numerical score, they found that the open numerical score was probably better. So we can learn that lesson and use that. What that means is that 0 on the scale is going to be a house that uses 0 net energy, driven usually by having solar panels on the roof. It can also go energy positive. So you could have, there are homes in Boston now that are energy positive. So you could have a -10, which would probably increase its market value significantly. If you heat with oil or natural gas or a modern heat pump, that's going to affect the efficiency of your home, and that's going to show up in the energy score. Another element of the scorecard we're considering is having a carbon or a greenhouse gas metric alongside that energy score. So your energy score might be 80 or 110, but then we also have a greenhouse gas score saying, okay, your house is going to emit 6 tons or 4 tons or 2 tons. So that if you're a city like Boston that's really concerned about reducing your carbon, you've got that metric being deployed at the same time as this market-facing energy metric.
So, do we have any questions out there? I'm going to come over and let you ask a question, and then we'll go from there.
Hans mentioned the need to simplify the policy. So if we're going to talk about energy efficiency in terms of pure energy efficiency, and you get a rating for that, and then whether or not your fuel has carbon in it gives you yet another rating. So are you concerned that this could end up in a few too many numbers that people get lost in?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So we've had energy efficiency audits available. Hopefully everyone's tried that if you are living in Massachusetts. If you get an energy audit, you get a report that's usually about 7 to 10 pages long. There's a lot of information in there. We actually think that what a scorecard will do is really simplify and condense that down, and with 2 metrics essentially say, this is the average house, this is where you are, this is where you could get to with incentivized measures from our program. So it's a really, it is an attempt to be elegant and simple about what your choices are. The carbon piece, I think, is the long-term direction that we'll have to go in. So we want to have an energy piece and probably a carbon piece as well. That's what we've been field testing. But I think there's also an important stakeholder piece to this to find out how do people react to that, how do stakeholders feel about that. The final scorecard, we don't really know what that's going to look like, but that would be our straw proposal.
You were trying to get in the voice of the real estate agencies, which I think is really important here, because otherwise we can end up in an echo chamber here. And so I'll try. From their perspective, this looks like meddlesome government, right? They're imposing, the government is trying to impose an activity on them that they don't see a demand for in the marketplace. They have introduced some of this into the database of Helix and so on, to the extent that they've seen a demand for it. But I mean, let's face it, most people care about curb appeal, and they don't really care that much about energy. So it's not, the demand has not been there. They see then government comes here and says, you know, in the name of climate change, which we think is a hoax anyway, they're forcing us to do this. That's the opposition, and we have to take the opposition seriously and not just pretend they're not there.
Anybody want to take that one?
I can attend. So I just, with Helix and what that resource is it's meant to be a tool that can be used in mandatory and involuntary situations. So we're seeing policies Massachusetts is doing, utility programs, and others that are starting to come up in the marketplace. And so what Helix is meant to do is provide a tool to bring that information in a seamless, automated way. That way there is not an added or not much added to real estate professionals' task already of selling these homes, but by populating it automatically into the MLS for them. So when a real estate professional goes into the MLS and types in an address that they are trying to sell, it pulls in all the publicly available information available through data aggregators. And so what Helix will do is it will kind of become a part of that data aggregation aspect and populate the fields that MLS will have with home energy information. So as to whether or not the client that person is working with is interested in it or not, that information will just be there for them and provide transparency. And then hopefully as that transparency grows, there will be more market demand for it, but we're trying to just kind of create that tool to drive the market transformation, even though sometimes we're doing it ahead of policy in a lot of instances here. And just trying to make it available to cities, to states, across the region, and hopefully beyond eventually to have a tool to allow them to do that. And a big aspect that we see is just education and outreach to the real estate market and providing them the tools and resources to understand the value of it. And it can be market transformation is a very slow moving process, and it's not going to happen overnight, but you can provide the tools and resources available to them to help with that transition as we see it.
I think I'll take a shot at it too. I know less than all the panelists, but my sense is that it's not the inconvenience of incorporating these in the real estate transaction that's bothering the real estate industry. They just think it'll meddle in. It might confuse the issue. It might turn some people away from a home. It might just make it, yeah, it's about the money. But it's also politically very interesting that Charlie Baker, you said Mitt Romney was pursuing it too. Charlie Baker, who's not known for bold moves, and a Republican, is pushing this. I think that was one of the more surprising things when he came out in support of it. Marty Walsh, if he did this, I don't think people would blink too much of an eye. But
Charlie Baker, yes.
Well, credit scores are used to lower interest rates for borrowing to buy a house. Would a better score also help lower the cost of the mortgage?
That's a great question. We know the answer is yes. And the reason we know that is that PERS ratings, which are really used on new construction, the agency that organizes PERS ratings, ResNet, was originally set up with that goal. And so in the new construction market, PERS ratings have been used to show that the utility costs of a home could be lower than average. And that allows somebody buying a home that has a low score to borrow more money because you can show, okay, the total cost to manage and own that home is going to be lower if the utility costs are lower. So there's a great precedent there, and there's a lot of interest, both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who provide a lot of programs to banks that serve low to moderate income home buyers, as well as multifamily property owners, have been really researching this area. So I think that will come too, but again, that will come only when there's really a market for these scores and when there's a standardized system and we have these things in place. So a little bit chicken and egg, but a lot of work has already been done in that arena, and so we think that will come quickly.
Following on to the same real estate issue, Energy Star ratings and fuel efficiency for cars, I'm sure the appliance makers and automakers didn't love those things when they came along. My question is, taking this up one more notch, is there a program afoot to educate our legislators about this so they don't just hear the real estate agent yelling at them, oh, make sure to vote no on this thing, because we got to get this through and then figure out what to do exactly with it. But I was talking to my local representative, and she was like, oh, no, we could do voluntary program, but there can be nothing mandatory. And of course, if it is mandatory, it's kind of worthless. So what do you think about that and say about it?
I don't have a lot of expertise in the legislature, but I do think that because this has been in a couple of cycles of the legislature, I think there's more and more awareness of the concept. And I think the governor being willing to stand up and say this is a priority for him is going to get a lot of legislators' attention. But I think there are other stakeholder groups out there hopefully informing legislators about this topic.
Okay, well, we're on this side of the room. Anybody over here have questions?
Hello. So a lot of the utilities in Massachusetts already have, like you said before, a version of personalized energy reports that they send to people. So how would you imagine that this works with the utility stakeholders and some of the versions of what they're calculating put out to have that sort of standardized across utilities, especially if they have service territories outside of one state, and sort of normalize it across their service territory?
I think maybe both of us can speak to that. The main utilities, a lot of the utilities in Massachusetts overlap with other states. So if they do work in Connecticut, they're already doing scorecard delivery with their audit, and they're using the DOE score. We may end up using the same modeling engine that DOE uses, so that would be the same data inputs. It's just that the scorecard that comes out at the other end would have a Massachusetts look and feel to it. There are other opportunities there. We talked about operational ratings, but there's nothing that is technically difficult about doing that. If you've got a 7-page report now, you might get an 8-page report. You might just add the scorecard as a page. You might even be able to make it a 4-page report because there's more concise information. That's something for the utilities, I think, to decide. But from a technical standpoint, it's straightforward. And the pilot that we did in the Springfield area, 3,800 homes, that was integrated into our Mass Save program. So it was delivered by Columbia Gas, what was then Western Mass Electric, which is now Eversource, and National Grid. So they all have field experience doing this. And my understanding is some of the audit software in use now actually calculates the scorecard, they just don't save it and print it out. So there's varying levels of capability in place.
And just to add on to that too, a lot of the different scorecards that are out there are DOE, home energy score, PERS ratings, and a lot of those are national scale scorecards. So on an instance where it might be homegrown, that might have some implications for the utilities, but as Ian said, technologically it's very viable to handle that, but a lot of the other ones are national, and I don't think would have too much implications for utilities across different states or within the region. And a lot of times you do see in the region of, for instance, National Grid working in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York. They, as some different types of regulatory proceedings kick off in one state and they might have experience with it in another, they learn from that experience as well as to what their company has done. Just thinking between Rhode Island and New York, where New York has whole building data aggregation for multifamily and commercial, very similar benchmarking energy information. And then Rhode Island started a proceeding to determine whether or not that was something they wanted to consider. And they learned from the proceeding that was happening in New York and internally, I'm sure, had a lot of that information and how it would work already available to them. So I think that it can be beneficial with utilities crossing state borders in a way with this type of transparency policy and program moving forward.
I was wondering, Hans, if you could speak to any statistics on the conversion rates of once either buyer or seller gets a scorecard, what percent of those people actually go ahead and make these energy efficiency improvements to their home? Is there research out there on that yet?
Your question was how many?
What are the conversion rates from receiving a scorecard to a homeowner actually making an energy efficiency retrofit or upgrade to their home?
In our field test, the result was that at the beginning, they have been asked, do you plan to do any renovation? And there was, I think, approximately 10% of the people they attended this field test were interested to make a renovation. And we did the same question after the presentation of the scorecard and the results and the recommendation. And there was a big change, and you have seen in the graphs for the landlords and for the private owners. So they have more than doubled the people or the owners to invest into their buildings. So the scorecard has really had an impulse in the decision to start any renovation process. And can I also add to the discussion before, our experience about implementing the calculation into other software tools or some other processes. I think that's important that we use existing processes to integrate them. But the most important thing what we learned is at the end, the image of the scorecard has to be the same all around the country or the state. Otherwise, if you have different images, depending on the used software, then you get a confusion. So that's the most important thing, that you really have one national or state decision how the image should be and what kind of software you have as a backup to use. That is not the main thing. At least that's what we learned. If you have two or different images, then the people are confused.
So if I can add to that, I mean, we did our own field demonstration in not just the city of Springfield, but some of the more rural communities around it, because we were trying to get a cross-section. And the conversion rate in that area prior to the pilot, the year immediately before, I believe was about 27%. And that's because we already had the mass save program, so we had good incentives for insulation, air sealing, heating system replacement. During the pilot period where we were offering the scorecard as sort of the front page of the report, I believe the conversion rate went up to about 40%. So there was a significant bump in conversion rate there. And that is one of the more compelling aspects of that pilot. We also had a third-party evaluator do both a phone survey and then I think a web-based survey of participants. And there was very high approval for the scorecard. And one of the questions we kind of threw in at the end was like, would this be useful to you when buying a house? And that got the most positive response. I think it was over 95% of people said it'd be very useful when buying a house. Whereas there's only about 88% actually like the scorecard for their own decision making. Still very high. So it was a very positive consumer response.
Hi, I have a very basic question for Ian. Is this initiative driven by Governor Baker's executive order to slash emissions across all economic sectors? And how will the Baker administration use this? Will there be carbon accounting that will contribute? Will this program help the state achieve its goals under the Global Warming Solutions Act? And how will that carbon accounting be done?
Sure. So, I mean, I think, I can't speak for Governor Baker. I work in the administration, but I do think that his interest in achieving our greenhouse gas reduction goals is what's driving this. The secretary that I work for and the governor have both said they want market-based solutions rather than government mandates. And I think that's a much more pragmatic way to go. So yes, I think that's a big driver behind introducing this, is to say, just like with cars, if you make people aware, then they can make an informed choice. And we have really good incentive programs, so we're trying to inform people about something that is hopefully going to save them significant amounts of money. So the economic incentives are all nicely aligned. This idea of energy scorecards was put in the state climate plan. There's a 2020 Clean Energy Climate Plan. Both the first version of that, which I think came out in 2010, and the 2015 update recommended residential scorecards. So in some ways, the governor is following through on that. We'll see if we can get it implemented by 2020 or not.
Is it 2020 or 2021 that the goal is?
I think no sooner than 2021. But that doesn't mean that voluntary programs couldn't start ahead of that, knowing that a broader market adoption might come.
Anybody else for a question, or do you want to have drink some beer or whatever?
The last one.
Okay.
So are all these formulas and ways of generating these scores publicly available, or especially the one for Massachusetts, has it been floated out to the public to digest yet?
So in the Massachusetts case, we can tell you what we're using for our pilots, but what the legislation that's proposed would do is start a stakeholder forum to say, okay, these are the choices. The Department of Energy has their score and their modeling methodology, and that's publicly available. You can see all the inputs and the formula. The first pilot that we did the energy modeling behind that was developed by a local guy, Michael Glasnick, who's developed the energy software for a lot of the energy efficiency audit programs used around the country. So it's just a coincidence that he's based, maybe it's not a coincidence, that he's based in Massachusetts, in Boston. So there are 2 or 3 choices on what the technical kind of formulas are, but they are well tested. They've been around for a long time. We've been working with DOE on their score for about a decade. So I think it would just be, there may be some technical input on that, but I think there's going to be more stakeholder input on things like what is the look and feel? Do you have greenhouse gases as well as energy? What are the additional information is provided? But we look forward to getting to the point where we can start that kind of stakeholder process.
Allison, no one's asked you a question.
That's okay.
But I wondered if you could just sum up a little bit. So Ian's gotten asked a lot of questions because he's sort of trying to implement this program. As someone from the city of Boston, do you walk away from this discussion? I know you're familiar with this issue, you've thought about it, but do you walk away from this discussion, go back to City Hall and say, yeah, we should pursue this, or what's your takeaway from today?
I'd say my takeaway is that this is territory that people have a lot of experience in, right? This is not a new idea. It's a well-tried and tested idea in many markets. The key, as I think you said, is that we want to make sure that it's the devil is in the implementation. We have to make sure that when we implement in a way that does not provide anything that's burdensome or onerous or slows growth or slows access to information or slows transactions, but we know that we can. We can take the information that we gain from these other areas and potentially implement it in Boston or in Massachusetts in a pretty seamless way. We have a program right now called the Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance that's been in place for 4 years now for large construction for large buildings in the city of Boston. So even within Boston, we have systems in place to handle a system like this. So I'm very interested and optimistic. We just need to make sure we do it in the right way.
I want to thank all the panelists and also the audience. Great questions today. And now I've been told to tell you that this is the bar. Thank you very much.